18th, this is when Kaylee's accident turned into a bigger, spiraling out of control lie. Kaylee had to find a way to hide what had happened. And she realized she knew where she could hide the body. She knew what she could do, so she could claim that someone had kidnapped Caylee Anthony and no one could ever track her down, and Casey would be devastated, but the accident will never be exposed, and maybe her father will love her more because of the loss that she has suffered. So young Casey sneaks the car back after she knows her parents have gone to work, and she returns to the Anthony home. She backs the car into the garage and she goes to the neighbor's house because George did not have a shovel in the garage, and she knocked on the neighbor's door and borrowed a shovel. Casey Anthony took the shovel back and the neighbor spotted the car backed into the garage. Kaylee closed the garage door and opened the trunk. She cried as she picked up her daughter and carried her through the house and into the backyard. She took her daughter to somewhere where she knew that she could hide the fact that she had dug a hole and buried her daughter. She went to the playhouse for when they bought this big playhouse, and George decided he was going to put it in the backyard. He did not want young Kaylee to sit in the dirt in the backyard, so he put brick pavers down for the floor of this playground, this playhouse. Kaylee set young Kaylee on the ground, and she stepped into the playhouse with the shovel and tried to remove the brick pavers from the floor. For under those brick pavers is dirt. That's the perfect place to dig a hole and bury her daughter in a place that she loved. But more importantly, a place that no one would look and no one would see because it was covered with brick pavers. And no one would ever understand that underneath those brick pavers was her missing daughter. But there was a problem. The shovel wouldn't fit in the playhouse well. Kaylee was not that big or that strong, so she could not leverage the shovel well enough to pry the brick pavers out. And try as she might, she could not get them up. Casey began to panic. What do I do now? I don't know how to hide this. And now it's been 2 days. How are they going to understand that I've had her in the trunk of my car for 2 days? So Casey begins to think of another plan. And she realizes that if she can hide the death to make it look like a kidnapping that went wrong, perhaps she can escape the anger of her family. She runs into the house and she finds a trash bag. She gets a few of them. And as she had seen her parents do over the years with dogs and cats that they had lost, she got some duct tape and got the plastic. She got a blanket that was in the car that was Kaylee's. She got some other little things to make it comfortable for her daughter. And she laid her in the trash bags. And she taped it up. Taped it around the body. And her mind separated from her body a little bit more. And she mourned the loss of her daughter, but she separated from that loss. She put it in a closet and closed the door and locked it in her mind so that she could move forward. Casey took the body and put it back in her car. After such time, when it was convenient, she took it to the one place she knew that no one traveled, the woods near her home. At the time, there was some water starting to form from prior hurricanes. She went deep into the woods and found a spot and tried to dig a hole, but didn't do a very good job, and put the body there and cried and left. Now at this point, the defense will argue that the body wasn't found deep in the woods. At this point, the defense or the prosecution will argue that lots of crazy scenarios that you will see. But from here, it's very simple to show. EquiSearch started searching the woods, but after a few days of searching in these neighboring areas, the water was too high. The water had risen, at which point it had covered Kaylee's remains. There you will see testimony and see tables of the water levels of the woods near the home. And you will see some of EquiSearch's grid patterns. And you will see that they never went deeply into the woods. And at that point, Kaylee's body was submerged in water, triple bagged by trash bags, wrapped in duct tape, sealed from the outside, and hidden underwater from the hot Florida sun. Months passed. The water slowly began to recede. The road is at a slight slope, and you'll see maps of the territory topography. And as the ground lays like this, the body is back here. But as the water starts to move, it flows to the front, close to the highway, the only little service road nearby. As the water begins to recede, more of the bag becomes exposed. The sun begins to cook the remains inside the bag. And I know this will be difficult to hear. But those of us that have grown up in Florida and have lived in the hot sun or in other parts of the country that have this tremendous heat and humidity, you know that something trapped in a bag, such as a black trash bag that has stuff that could decompose, will decompose in the hot sun. And if the bag is sealed so that the air cannot escape, the bag will inflate. That is what happened to the remains of Caylee Anthony. The bag began to swell. As it swelled, it gained buoyancy. As it did, it rose from the sediment and slowly began to follow the flow of the water. The more it rose, the more it swelled. The more it swelled, the more it rose, until it was completely buoyant, and it drifted slowly, methodically along the flow of the nearly still water. And as the months passed, it worked its way towards the front of the road, where it finally snagged some branches and some limbs and came to rest 30, 40 feet from the road in an area that had previously been searched, so it was not searched again. While this happened, the weeds began to grow, the bones fell apart, the meat rotted and fell away, the bag continued to inflate and possibly eventually popped, or the bags deteriorated to a point to where some of the smell emanated from the bag. When that took place, The water had receded enough to where animals of all types descended on the bag. They tore the bag apart. They got in. They ravaged the body. They laid eggs. There were worms. There were all kinds of bugs, small animals. Actually were able to separate the head from the body and pull it out of the bag. In August, 2.5 months after all of this had happened, a serviceman was out in the woods to use the bathroom, and he thought he saw a skull. But on his way out of the woods, he happened to see a rattlesnake. And the rattlesnake frightened him. And his co-workers wanted to see the rattlesnake and were equally frightened. He pointed out the fact that he had seen something that looked like a skull, but no one wanted to go back there to see it. Instead, they grabbed the snake and they took it back to the office. Following day, or that night, Orange County meter reader Roy Kronk called the 911 hotline and informed them that he thought he had seen what appeared to be a skull. And the following day, he followed up. The following day, he followed up. Eventually, an officer came out, went out into the woods, but did not stay in the woods long because he had heard the story of the rattlesnake and fell and got dirty and was upset and came out and yelled and left. In December, Roy Kronk called again. And this time officers met him and he took him back out to the woods because he had been there. He went back into those woods in December, certain that something wasn't right. And when he went out there, he saw the skull. But this time, Roy Kronk used a stick to pick up the skull. He tampered with the lay of the body and the situation, and from that point on, the scene began to get compromised at an ever-increasing rate. Mr. Kronk moved the skull. Later, you'll see testimony where the skull was claimed to be in the bag, but then it was not in the bag, and then it was back in the bag. You'll see where Orange County did tests on the duct tape that they now claim is on the body, but you can never find any proof that it was on the body, just the theory that it was on the body. They will tell you stories of a heart-shaped sticker that was on there that you could find on the body, but now no one bothered to take a photo, and so now there's no evidence of that. People have become obsessed with this case. People have become ridiculously angered at the mother and the family. And to a certain degree, rightfully so, because who would not feel angered at the loss of such a young, beautiful girl? But do not mistake an accident for murder. As the prosecution lays out their case, you will find that they have taken the tidbits of information and lined them up in such a way that if you hold it in a particular light under a certain line at a certain angle with the sun set a certain way, then it all lines up to look like Casey Anthony murdered her daughter. But if you look at the facts of this case, as the facts of this case, and you take away all this crazy supposition and all the elaborate mumbo-jumbo that the prosecution laid out for you the last 24 hours, you will find that what you have is a mother who made a simple mistake that she will forever have to live with. And it is because of this mistake and because of this terrible tragedy that we are here today.